Welcome back, everybody. So today we're going to do a bit of speed testing on the Foundry Special. I selected this model because it is very typical of the kind of casting pattern that I intend to run on the Foundry Special. And actually I did the completed. This is only 25% of a casting pattern. Two halves go, make up a full unit, but it was physically too long to fit on the bed in its full form. So now the Foundry Special is able to do that, but I thought, well, since this is a typical shape, I would make it small so it doesn't take very long to print, and then figure out what print speeds I start to have artifacting. And I'm actually doing all the slicing for the bed on my smaller printer because the intent is to do a side-by-side comparison of which one is which one produces artifacts and which one doesn't, and it'll be interesting to see at what point it won't let you go any further. And so like these Ultimaker recommends a maximum of 150 millimeters a second. I tend to run much more conservatively on my existing printers, so I actually sliced all these files starting at 50 millimeters a second up in 25 millimeter increments all the way up to this very last one, which is 150 millimeters a second, and we'll see what kind of artifacting changes. Again, as always, go through a preview before we save it. Alright, so my speed test is all done and kind of came up with some interesting results. So this first piece was printed at 50 millimeters a second, maximum feed rate, and it goes a little bit slower in the tight turns just due to the acceleration settings. I also printed another one on in this gray was done on my older style printers. And then I did a 75 millimeters a second followed by a 100 millimeters a second, and it's matching 100 millimeters a second counterpart. And then 125 and then 150. 150 is pretty much the end of the road for FDM printers. Even the Cura software says not to go past that even for an Ultimaker, and the Cura software was developed for use on like an Ultimaker. But what we got here is at 50 millimeters a second, there's a certain amount of resonance that's in the printer, and it makes this kind of interesting salmon skinning effect. And what's kind of funny is it did the same thing to this one, almost the exact same spacing on the pattern. But on the new printer, once you bump up the speed a little bit more, I'll pick this one up, other than right where it went around the corner, it starts to smooth out where you don't really have the visible lining. And then really telling, here's the 100 millimeters a second, and even the transition has smoothed out, and it's a lot flatter as we go along there. Whereas the 100 millimeters a second on this one very much still has the pattern, but we're also having some layer shift, layer out of position issues. You probably can't really see that very well on the camera, but it's definitely some edging there. I guess that's the best way to do it. Just drag your thumb across there. And all that layer shifting makes for a much more difficult print to clean up. I mean, this one's really not bad. I was surprised how well that printer did at that speed. Generally, I run them around 50 millimeters a second just because it makes good, consistent results, even though they're not the best that they could be. But like, I continued on up, and here we got pretty much the same result as the 100 millimeters a second. And then the 150 millimeters a second still didn't really have any big fall off in resolution. In the end, I'm not going to run any of these printers as fast as I was running this one today. I kind of retooled my profile after the preliminary results. So instead of running 50 millimeters a second for everything, I've bumped the perimeter up to 60, the outermost perimeter up to 60 millimeters a second. The interior perimeters, so whatever other than the absolute outermost shell is now running at 80 millimeters a second, and the infill is running at 100 millimeters a second. I think that's probably the best compromise for quality and speed that I can get out of it. And I might do some once I start running that profile, see if it consistently works. And if it consistently works, see if I can tweak it a little bit further and get just that much more speed and speed out of it. So anyway, that's pretty much it for this video, and I hope you enjoyed my little torture test of this poor printer. And more to come, I'm sure. We gotta get the part cooling fan all hooked up and actually working. This was just kind of a test piece to see how I like the shroud design. Works pretty, or looks like it'll work pretty good, just flow wise. But I think I want to make it so it's a little bit stiffer in the x-axis here, just because I'm concerned it's gonna rattle around and make a harmonic. I really shouldn't have had it on there for this last piece, but I forgot to take it off when I started the test, and I didn't feel like stopping and restarting the test again. But